This content is being brought to you by the Bourbon Real Talk American Whiskey Aroma Kit. This is a tool that I put together to help all you whiskey aficionados out there develop your palates. You can sit down with the vials and train your senses, or you can sit down with a great dram and break that whiskey down to its components. If you have any interest of purchasing a kit of your own, head on over to bourbonrealtalk.com/shop and pick one up. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. Randy Sullivan here with a very special guest. He's not ready, you're not ready. I'm gonna be so extra during this video, and I apologize in advance, but I'm also going to say his name wrong. Let me see if I can get it right. It's Carlos de Aldecoa?
Perfect, look at you.
It's not perfect. Say it with like some Spanish flair. Let's hear.
How about de Aldecoa?
Oh, there you go. I lack the ability to do it that way. And so Carlos is the owner of Gulf Coast Distilling. Is it distillery, distilling co?
Distillers.
Gulf Coast Distillers.
Yeah.
And if you have not heard, this is going to be the largest Texas producer. Are you already the largest Texas producer?
I believe so.
Yeah. Already the largest Texas producer, but you've got all kinds of capacity coming online.
Right.
And really state-of-the-art equipment, amazing facility, and the story of how you got from where you started to where you are is absolutely insane. And so I will tell the audience, and I'll tell you, you didn't know I was going to say this, but I came down here for the Texas Whiskey Association event when you launched your rye product, which I think this is it,
That's
right?
correct.
And I walk in and I'm meeting people, and I don't know who anyone is, right? And so I get introduced to you. This is Carlos, and we're standing there talking, and I start to notice that the people that work here are acting slightly different around you than they are everyone else, right? And so I'm like, is this guy like the owner, like the master distiller, like what's going on? And so I asked you, I was like, is this your place? And you're like, yeah, this is mine and my family's place. Now, you guys don't know this yet, and we're gonna talk about this. His building's like a half-mile long. Like it's like the largest facility I have ever seen. So when I found out he owned it, and then you were so gracious to me all night long. I had the greatest time. You showed me around. It was so much fun. Whiskey was great. Event was great. So when I went home, I literally told everyone, you know those beer commercials where they say that this guy's the most interesting man in the world? Well, that's all bullshit, and that guy is an actor. But I met the real most interesting man in the world, and his name is Carlos.
De Aldecoa.
I could not say that part, but I wanted to. Deep in my heart. And so that is what motivated me to reach out to you when I was coming back down here.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so I'm very excited. So we've got a handful of your products available to taste. And so we're going to be drinking this guy. This is the straight rye whiskey, and this is your product, right? You made this here. Anything special that we need to know about this?
I mean, that blend, that mash and that product was developed jointly with David Pickerel. So that product, ultimately, it's a true 100% rye.
Okay.
That we did according to his recipe and process in the equipment that him and I designed in the plant. So it's been sitting in a barrel for a little bit over 2 years. We believe it's still a little bit young, but we are a little bit caffeinated and anxious to get the product out. We released a couple of barrels. We want people to try it out.
Gotcha.
So it's only in the distillery, and I think it's a great product that's going to continue to age and mature. We got probably about 6,000 to 7,000 barrels total that we're storing of the fills that we're doing. This is amongst I think is going to be one of the flagship brands in mashes that we'll be releasing out there.
I like that. So for those of you who are not, level 10 whiskey nerd, Dave Pickerel was the former master distiller at Maker's Mark. He left, became a consultant, and worked for many brands across the country. But probably the one that he's most well known for is Whistle Pig. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, and he will be sorely missed. He was a huge contributor to the craft movement and has helped many people to get off their feet. And you coming online with such a huge production capacity, I feel like it's awesome that you had that level of experience and leadership as part of your team.
Absolutely.
And I have tried this product, and I'm very excited to see what it's going to be like when it gets a little bit more age on it.
Right.
I'm glad you've got that stock that's like out there getting ready for the market. And what is this product?
So, I mean, we have our business model's a little different because we probably own about, that are on retail right now, between 8 and 12 different brands, right? So the idea is that, we have our flagship brand, Giant, we have some vodka brands and some gin brands, but then we also have what I believe would be great representations of a Kentucky or a Tennessee whiskey. So we will buy some Tennessee whiskey, we will buy some Kentucky whiskey, select some specific barrels, and do some releases on that product.
Gotcha.
So in the Hickory Hill product, we have some great 12-year-old product that I believe properly represents what a great Kentucky should be.
Gotcha.
We don't like to double barrel, we don't like to double age or do a finish. We like to keep it as authentic as it can be to the specific Kentucky product.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to, I think we tried it last time.
We did. I used my 2 barrel purchases or bottle purchases, to buy this, and thankfully there was a very nice young lady here that bought a bottle of the Rye Whiskey, and we were able to work something out later so that I was able to get some Rye Whiskey too.
Right.
So that was nice. But excellent product. Loved it. We talked a little bit about maybe doing a single barrel selection of that for my club. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
But
I do, and we're getting about, I think, 75 barrels coming in next week. Of the 50, we got some amazing products. We got some 13-year-old Tennessee that's coming in, sour mash. So we got a lot of different selections that I would love for us to taste over the next couple of weeks and do a barrel selection. That'd be great.
That is awesome. Now, what I get most excited about is previously unreleased whiskey. And so we've got this bad boy right here. This is not a normal whiskey glass. So what is this?
So one of the projects we were working with Dave Pickerel was a Canadian that would be aged or finished in a bourbon barrel here in Texas. So we have brought a couple of tankers in from Alberta. We got some 9-year-old and 12-year-old product that we're aging right now and finishing in bourbon barrels from our bourbon barrels. So we got that some are finishing in a kind of wheated bourbon, some are finishing in a rye barrel. We're going to be releasing it under a new brand that we're launching under the name of Pickerel. That will be in honor of the Pickerel family. We're working with his wife, Jeanette, to get part of the proceeds of the product that we're selling back to his family.
Okay.
So
now, was that part of your original agreement with him when you hired him on as a consultant, or is that something that you did after the fact?
that's something we did post his passing.
Right.
So him and he was instrumental in helping me understand large scale and quality production of whiskey and bourbon. So I think it's unfortunate that he passed, but we continue to be connected with his family and supporting his contribution and supporting them.
Yeah. Now, how are you able to use his name on your label?
We trademarked it and we did an agreement with the family.
So you own Dave Pickerel's name?
That is correct.
So that was one of the reasons why when I left, I was like, this guy is amazing, right? Because, you can Google search anyone, and we're going to get into it, but you're a coffee baron, basically. Your family is, internationally involved in the coffee trade. And if someone Googles you, there's been some negative reporting on you. But when you met Dave Pickerel, you fell in love with him, you fell in love with his family, and you went above and beyond just your consulting agreement. And you've been working with his family after his passing to make sure that they're taken care of and that he gets the recognition that he deserves. And there was and this is just me talking, and I'm sure this makes you uncomfortable because he doesn't like cameras and things like that, even though you've testified in front of the House Ways and Means Committee, and we're going to talk about that later. He doesn't like cameras, but that's what impressed me about you, is that you chose personally to do something that you thought was right, to honor somebody that's done so much for the industry that you're involved in, and I really respect that. And so this is do you know any of the details on this whiskey, like how long it was aged or anything like that?
Yeah, this is right over 9 years aged. So this is still a cask strength. So it's probably about 130. But I think it's got a great finish. We have some that we can try later that's actually been sitting in a barrel for about 12 months. And I'd love for you to taste that one. So this has not yet touched a bourbon barrel.
Wow. Whew. It's got some heat to it.
It's a little hot.
It's a little bit hot. All right. All right. Yeah. I mean, I'm getting a strong mid-palate fruit component on that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and it turns into a different product. And we have different proofs here. We got a 120. We actually filled barrels at 110 and some at 120. So we can kind of blend and see how it behaves differently in the barrel. But when you take it from the 130s, it's a 134 down to a 110 or 120, it just opens up the liquid tremendously.
All right. Well, we should try those for sure. And so you did not start off because you own, operate Gulf Coast, and you own a number of brands, but you didn't start off in the spirits business, right?
That's correct.
Your family started off in the coffee business. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And originally in Spain, did I read that correctly?
With my grandparents in Spain in the 20s, and then into Mexico, and then into Houston. So we've been, third generation family-owned coffee company.
Right. So one of the things I read about you was that you were the scion of a wealthy Spanish family. Like they have all these like catchphrases for you on the internet, which I find fascinating. How do you feel about that stuff?
I'm not sure. I think some of those, I think a lot of people have a lot of free time and like to post stuff on the internet, but we're just
these are not just like people. These are like media professionals that are like writing these headlines when they're writing articles about you and your family. So you guys started in the 20s and then
moved into Mexico.
About when was that?
That was probably late, the Spanish Civil War, so early 40s, that they moved down to Mexico. And then started some coffee growing operations, and then roasting and packaging and branded business in Mexico. And then started in the U.S. at about the early 70s.
Okay. And that now were you born in Mexico?
I was born in Mexico.
Okay.
That's correct.
And are you the head of the family of companies now?
I am, yeah. So we have a very close family. I see my parents on a daily basis. I eat lunch with them about once or twice a week. I have 4 sisters. They all directly or indirectly work in the business. So we have a really close, blessed family to all be together and work together and be able to kind of enjoy life.
Are you the only son?
I am.
Okay. So that's a lot of weight on your shoulders to carry on the family tradition. Are you training up the next generation so that you can get a little bit of rest?
I am. I bring my 5-year-old. My wife says that he's got to go to the park more than to the office. But, this is like a park. So
it is a park.
It is, yeah. So we get him in the forklifts, get him in the trucks, so get him up the elevator. So it's that's how I was exposed at a young age to manufacturing.
So what are the names of the companies that your family owns so that people know who you are?
So we have, Eximus Coffee, which is roast and ground packaging. So in that business, we do private label and contract manufacturing. So whether it's coffee for like a Maxwell House or a major retail chain or H-E-B, those are the type of products that we manufacture at that plant in addition to our brands. So we own the brand Aldecoa, we own the brand Capio, which is a ready-to-drink coffee beverage. We own Café Diario and several other brands that we sell in retail. We have a company called Cadeco Industries, which is a warehousing and distribution company. So we operate about 1.5 million square feet of warehousing and distribution, primarily related to green coffee storage, but also related to third-party logistics. And then we have some real estate, various names of real estate companies. And then we have the Gulf Coast Distillers Company, which is what we started about 4 or 5 years ago on utilizing this amazing asset to make whiskey and bourbon in production.
Right. Yeah, that's phenomenal. So if you had to guess, what percentage of the U.S.'s coffee does one of your companies touch before it makes it to the consumer?
I'd say, between 30 and 40% we're somehow touching that coffee at some level of the supply chain. It could be just in the green coffee warehousing, it could be in the logistics, in the transportation, or the roasting and packaging all the way to retail.
Did you hear that? 40% of the U.S.'s coffee. That's amazing. That is phenomenal. That is awesome. But you guys have leveraged that in other ways, right? So the facility that we are in was formerly used for a different business. What was that?
So we bought this, it's got to be about 25 years ago or so, from Uncle Ben's Rice. So when I graduated from engineering in college, I wanted to build my own plant. I was always involved in my dad's manufacturing plant, but I thought it would be cool to have my own toy. So I just said, Dad, why don't I buy this asset, buy this facility that Uncle Ben's was just shutting down, and convert it from a rice plant to a coffee plant. So that was about 25 years ago. I was still a senior in college, and my dad loaned me the money and said, well, you got to pay me back in 12 months. If not, I'm going to become a partner. So I just was not interested in having partners. So I did my very best to get the business up and going and pay my dad off. And from there, we continued to grow the business. So we took this rice asset that was built in the 1930s and 40s by the Department of Defense, and all of the rice to World War II came out of this plant. So the legacy, the history behind this facility, not just at the national or local level, but international level, was pretty great. So taking that facility, converting it from a rice plant to a coffee plant, and now converting a section of the plant to make whiskey production, which we're still taking an agricultural product, if you think about it, right? Whether it's rice, whether it's coffee, and whether now it's rye or barley or wheat, putting it into our silos to then convert it into a product that people want and enjoy is part of our connection. So it's been a great journey.
So a couple of questions. How did you pay off such a large piece of industrial real estate in 12 months?
The deal
because
that we made,
you weren't producing coffee here at that
Right.
point, right? So how did you generate revenue to pay that off?
well, I didn't generate revenue. I actually went in, and the negotiation I did with Uncle Ben's from Mars was that I was going to buy the facility as is where is. So then they stopped investing money to demo the facility and the equipment. So what I did is I said, okay, fine, I'll buy all the equipment as is, don't spend any more money. And I took all that equipment, I got a bunch of demo guys in here, and we started selling, rice-specific equipment that I was not going to use,
Right.
and started selling it across the world to different rice operating companies that needed those machines.
Right.
So that I was able to pay off my investment to my dad by just selling the assets that were not needed in the rice production, because I was going to do coffee production in this facility.
Well, hey, my wife's off camera. What was Richard Gere's name in Pretty Woman? Do you know? So you're looking at the real life, like Pretty Woman Richard Gere. Like he bought a company.
Did you call me a pretty woman?
No. The movie. It's just a reference point, right? And he would buy a company, and then he would find companies that their assets were worth more than the company was selling for, and then he would sell those assets off, and then he would own what was left.
Right.
And that's what you did.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, I didn't shut the company down. It was a company that Uncle Ben's at that time had made.
Yeah, they had already shut down.
They had already shut it down. They'd already left the employees, moved it all to Greenville, Mississippi. So we were just buying an asset at that time, not an operation.
Right. So, when I got back from Houston, people kept saying, like, how was your trip? And I was like, I met the most interesting man in the world that's the real life, like Richard Gere from Pretty Woman, because I don't know the character's name. Edward what? Edward Lewis. Yeah, that would not have helped, because I'm not sure anyone remembers that besides my wife. But I was so fascinated by that, because, obviously I'm in real estate, not the same type that you are. And to be able to identify that while you're still a senior in college, that asset had that potential, and then to go out and do that hard work and to find the buyers, I mean, that's just amazing. And that springboarded you into an opportunity to not only grow great businesses, but to do a lot for your local community and to employ a lot of people.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
It is. I mean, we're committed to the community. We've been in this part of town for, 25, 30 years, and we continue to grow and invest and hire and develop people. I mean, create families and give back to societies. I mean, that is our role as companies.
Now, as somebody that's been involved in the coffee trade, when I was researching to do this interview, I saw video of you testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee. What were you there for?
So one of the issues on getting Houston on the map related to global coffee trade, or Texas on the map, was it's the ad valorem tax, right? The end of the year inventory tax of any assets or inventory held in Texas. So the coffee is a futures traded commodity that's licensed by a governing board, whether it's the International Commodities Exchange or the London's International Futures Exchange. Like, they could. So for us to hold those stocks in Houston and be a certified port, we could not have the ad valorem tax. Because when I talk to the large traders and say, let's have Houston to be your entry point, they said, well,
we can't afford it.
We can't because we get a bill from the Harris County Tax Authority or from the Houston Independent School District, and we don't get that in Miami, we don't get that in New Orleans, we don't get that in New York or Antwerp or Bremen or any other, Barcelona or any other port in the world. So we're competing at a global scale. So and Texas was already and continues to be very well represented in the roaster community with Folgers and Maxwell House and Nestle's and Starbucks and everybody processing in the state of Texas, but we didn't have a friendly port from a global standpoint as what they consider friendly for the coffee trade. So we formed an association, which is a Greater Houston Coffee Association, that with the Port of Houston and some lobby power, we passed an amendment to the state constitution. There was a statewide vote to amend the Texas Constitution to exempt the ad valorem tax of green coffee and cocoa stored only on Harris County or in Harris County. So that we had to testify with the Ways and Means and show that, ultimately put together a business case where by exempting the green coffee, the uptick that you would get on the industry and investment related to green coffee trade would far exceed any tax that would have been paid on that coffee.
Right.
So when that happened and post that happening, Houston grew as a leading port and one of the top ports in the world for green coffee storage, surpassing New Orleans, surpassing Miami, surpassing LA, and getting Houston to be a significant contributor holding a major part of the inventory, global coffee inventory stocks. That also triggered coffee roasters relocating into Texas. That also triggered transportation companies, brokerage companies, trading companies. So I think we've shown how, private sector, public sector, looking after what's right for the business and addressing the business concern became a major success story. So that was my reason with Ways and Means and testifying with the Port of Houston on the reasons behind why this made sense for the county, which was challenging because, again, it's statewide that had to vote amending the state constitution, but only exempting us in a very specific commodity being coffee and only in Harris County.
Only in Harris County. Gotcha. Well, that definitely moved the needle for employment and opportunities. So that is awesome. One of the things that I found remarkable whenever I started researching you so that I'd have appropriate questions was there are some negative news reports out there about union strikes at your coffee plant. And me personally, I used to work for a small business. And, just growing up and hearing about unions when I was in school, I was told that they protected the little guy, right? The guy that works hard and he just wants to provide for his family. But my first experience with unions was not very positive. I was running a small company. We had a government contract. The union wanted to unionize that contract. And they came in and made promises to some of our employees that they would become managers if they would file false labor claims against our company.
Right.
And they did. And this small business that I was working for, we didn't have the money to defend ourselves against, these false labor claims. And we had to hire a labor attorney, and there's not a ton of them, and the ones that are good are super expensive. And it was about to bankrupt us. And I had this really hilarious conversation with a federal government employee, and they sent me over this request for information. And I was like, yeah, so here's the thing. We've decided not to bid on this contract, and it's up for renewal because we don't have the money to deal with the union. And so we're just writing out the rest of our contract. And we also don't have the money to deal with your request for information. And so our new policy is no, we're not doing anything.
Right.
And she was like, and it was like probably 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday. And she goes, well, if you don't give me this information, I'm going to have to work all weekend long to get a subpoena and all of this stuff. And I told her, I said, well, I suggest that you stop extorting money out of small businesses because I'm not giving you anything, right? So that was my experience. We ended up having to walk away from that government contract. It was a profitable contract for us. That company did go bankrupt later. So I'm not a huge fan of like the union process. And personally, you know, I know that there was a huge need for the union before, you know, OSHA standards and whatnot, and, you know, working conditions weren't safe. But that's, you know, nowadays, not as big of a fan of what it is that they do. And so you've been involved in a couple of union strikes. So, and you get portrayed in the media and on YouTube as a greedy individual that is taking advantage of your employees. And so, you know, some people that watch this may Google search you. What do you say about that?
Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of the biggest name in whiskey and coffee that you've never heard, Carlos de Aldecoa. This gentleman's story was absolutely fascinating, and you will not want to miss the second half of this interview. So please subscribe to our channel, Bourbon Real Talk, and you'll be notified when part 2 comes out. And while you're there, if you don't mind, please like and review. That'll help more people find the channel. Talk to you next week.